Taliban have been taking over territories slowly and deliberately for many months and even a period of years.
You had the Taliban skillfully picking off provinces where they reckoned they could suborn the governor, otherwise get the warlords and the elite on side.
Afghanistan is spinning out of control.
I saw 20 years of engagement in Afghanistan be more or less undermined in a few weeks.
Well, everyone was surprised by the speed at which the 34 provincial capitals fell to the Taliban.
We have noted with great concern the speed with which they have been moving and the lack of resistance that they have faced.
And then you had President Ashraf Ghani quitting his post. And once your commander-in-chief flees, that's it. It's all over.
I'm in shock. Just I'm thinking what's happening and why.
It was becoming clearer and clearer that something is going to be happening. And that something is not going to be anything else but the fall of Afghanistan.
What we did see in the collapse was more of a political collapse than it was a military collapse. And that was not foreseen.
Did you expect Kabul to fall as quickly as it did?
No. And I don't know anybody who did.
We knew the Taliban were coming, we just didn't know when. Cities and towns kept falling, but on the face of it, Kabul seems pretty much as normal. The usual traffic clogs up huge sections of the city, closed and barricaded from potential suicide attacks. But this isn't normal. It's very tense. High numbers of people are making their way to the capital. It's an early indicator that things are already going badly wrong. They flood into the city's parks carrying whatever possessions they can. And they huddle together, trying to find safety. The lightning offensive of the Taliban on cities in the north, east, south and west of the country is simply overwhelming the army and the government. We met Farida Khurasani. Her husband and brother, both police officers, were killed by the Taliban in Kunduz. She's escaped to Kabul with her 2 children. She has nothing now.
Do you think the Americans leaving has caused this problem? So the Taliban have taken Logar province. Its outer borders are only about 37 miles down the road behind me, and it feels now that the fall of Kabul is inevitable. So the city's now very much divided between those who can leave or hope they can leave and those who know they simply can't.
We find some of them crowded around computers manned by experts, groups of men struggling to fill out the application forms for immigration visas. Security guards, translators, a whole array of jobs. Their visas, the ones they're applying for, is their only passage to safety. But the process has been slow, and it's becoming more and more obvious that time is running out. Ali has worked as a special forces translator since 2011. He still doesn't have permission to travel.
It is our turn to be helped. We help them, we save their lives. We were the people who communicate with 2 cultures. Otherwise, without interpreters, they did nothing.
The Taliban, though, really are getting close to the city now. Some say it's only, relatively speaking, 7-10 miles away, maybe slightly further. The speed of the Taliban takeover has, of course, surprised many.
The air of uncertainty in Kabul grows by the minute. At the airport, British and American military and, crucially, their equipment begin arriving. Transporter planes landing and taxiing on the runways. By Sunday morning, we know the Taliban are just a few miles away. Helicopter gunships appear over our heads and over the presidential palace and government buildings in the center of the city. For hours they circle above, but there is nothing they can do to stop the takeover of the capital now. Occasional gunfire rips through the air. Throughout the day, Chinook helicopters ferry United States Embassy staff to the international airport. Road moves are now deemed too dangerous. Near the presidential palace, I watch as the Taliban enter the very heart of this country's government. And I'll be honest, I was surprised.
Hospital care would continue. So I hear a lot of shouting coming down the road behind me. In fact, it is I think it's a procession of the Taliban. Yes, it is. There's the white flag, and they're coming down the street just next to us. They're in their shalwar kameez. They're led by a white flag.
The world is following events in Afghanistan with a heavy heart and deep disquiet about what lies ahead.
They came in the palace. It's shocking really.
How did you feel when you saw those?
Oh, no, really, I just offed my TV. I didn't watch. I can't see my country with that kind of culture. No.
Flight of the senior government officials and the evacuation of the embassies seem to be the things that precipitate this panic of people flocking to the airports. Well, we were caught up with our pants at half-mast. I don't think there's any other way around this.
It was the most unbelievable scene of my life. And every single day, because of this chaos and because of this rush of people, a lot of people in Afghanistan, that they had the possibility with the paperwork and some of them with their visas and everything, they could not get out of the country. And they're still stuck.
The people, they left Afghanistan. They are ministers, they are NGO charity directors, they are judges, they are the doctors. They don't want to leave, but the situation forced them to leave.
The airport scenes epitomize the horror of the whole thing.
People are just leaving everything behind but what they could carry on their backs.
I would say I was shocked and sorry. Shocked because I had never expected to experience such an disorderly withdrawal.
People clinging to the bottom of the plane is the image that really sticks. sticks with me. People being so desperate that they're flocking to the airplanes and trying to hold on, get into wheel wells, and somehow hang on to an airplane that's departing.
I mean, it's just a desperate image, which shows, unfortunately, just exposes how much at fault we are, how much to blame we are for this catastrophe.
As every day passes, the relief operation is getting more and more urgent and desperate. The British military are now trying to move thousands of people out of Afghanistan in just days before the August 31st deadline. On the airport road, a makeshift barricade separates two armies who fought for 20 years.
Well, this is a humanitarian effort, but it's being done by the military because we're effectively in a war zone. And what's incredible, just one step away, there's the Taliban right next to the British forces who are trying to assess the people who are trying to get onto these relief flights. As one of the soldiers said to me, they could mess this up by just sending 1,000 blokes down the road. At the moment, they're cooperating and they're actually keeping things calm.
The Taliban are a menacing presence, although they are trying to assist in their own way. Along the road, they're controlling the crowds of people trying to reach the British position. It looks like chaos, but there is a method here.
French.
The soldiers call out for interpreters as different nationalities arrive. Their paperwork is checked, and if they pass muster, they're directed to the entry gate to be processed. But many do not qualify. The soldiers absolutely hate doing this, but without the paperwork, they have to turn people away. It's distressing for everyone. We watch as terrified families, men, women, and large numbers of children are sent back. Back into Afghanistan, back towards the Taliban. Inside the British cordon, we meet Fatima. Her husband joined the Taliban and took to beating her. She and her 4-year-old have nothing but a United Nations letter identifying them as victims.
Afghanistan is Taliban. Taliban is terrorists. My husband is terrorist Talib. America, Canada, France, her kishwar, me and just my...
So you and your daughter, you'll go anywhere? Any country?
Any country.
We mention her story to the officer in charge outside. The soldiers have a reasonable degree of latitude in their decision-making, so Major Steve White decides to enter her into the system with no guarantees it will work out. It's quite simply an act of human kindness in all this mayhem. Fatima makes it inside.
Safe. You're safe.
And we later learn she made it to Germany. Major White may have saved their lives, but he's certainly given them a chance of a better one. These soldiers are involved in a mission as diametrically opposed to anything they could ever have expected in Afghanistan. The truth is the Taliban have won, and every day here is getting stranger and stranger. Amongst the crowd, British passport holders wave to us, unable to come forward, told to stay where they are. There are lots of British nationals and Europeans as well, waiting for their turn inside.
Well, the crowds have got so close now that the soldiers have to form basically a square to get from one compound to another. They're taking out civilians, and they're trying to keep everyone calm. Loads of them have got the right to come inside, but at the moment they can't. It's very, very tense here, very, very tense, because these people are desperate.
In single file, the evacuees headed to the United States are brought out of the British camp and directed to the Americans. These are whole families attempting to escape the new Taliban Emirate of Afghanistan. There are always so many children, hopefully too young to know what on earth is going on. From the compound, a helicopter lifts off, ferrying the refugees to the military airport. This day is calm. It's never going to be this calm again.
Why did the US and the Allied forces leave Afghanistan?
Well, I think President Biden's laid it out pretty clearly. He has reminded Americans virtually every time he's addressed this issue. He's reminded us of where this started, which is with the narrow objective to bring al-Qaeda to justice and make ourselves more safe.
The reason we went into Afghanistan was very straightforward. The Afghan war was a war of necessity.
In the wake of 9/11, 20 years ago, we went there to ensure we weren't about to be attacked again. We didn't know much about al-Qaeda, and we certainly didn't know that the only attacks that we were about to suffer were the ones the previous day on 9/11.
We also considered it part of our territorial security to prevent Afghanistan from once again becoming a safe haven for terrorists.
Taliban government had been presented with an ultimatum to give access to Western forces to the al-Qaeda bases. The Taliban government refused to give that access. So the objective was the removal of the Taliban government and then the installation of an alternative government.
It took almost no time.
If we deliver to the Afghan people what we promised, this will be a great day. If we don't deliver, this will go into oblivion.
After that, we had a responsibility to rebuild an Afghan society from scratch. We spent from 2001 till 2014 to do that.
So there was this urgency in the early days to address the immediate threat, which emanated out of Afghanistan.
If we'd not gone to Afghanistan, there would have been, as it were, the equivalent of more 9/11s.
Especially, I think, after bin Laden was brought to justice in 2011, American public support for the war has waned.
Our troops will continue coming home at a steady pace as Afghan security forces move into the lead. Our mission will change from combat to support. America, it is time to focus on nation building here at home.
The strategic failure of the United States lies in President Obama 2011 announcing arbitrarily that he wanted to reduce troops dramatically by 2014. Taliban thought fine. Then President Trump, who claimed to be the deal maker of the century, holding direct discussions with the Taliban without any of the other parties present, including the Afghan government.
We've had very successful negotiations. We think they'll be successful in the end. The other side's tired of war. Everybody's tired of war.
That was a big mistake. I would call it a catastrophe.
Everything was put on a silver platter and was given to them with a pat on the back and saying that, you are the winners. And I don't understand it with the United States. How did you accept I thought the Americans, what they hated the most was to lose.
The Taliban have every incentive to wait for us to leave because their leverage is going to be higher, and the Afghan government had every incentive to try to undermine the talks in hopes that we would stay.
It is a big mistake to reveal to your opponents on which date you will withdraw. Never ever tell your enemy when you will withdraw.
Mr. Trump, who claimed to be this great deal maker, had gone into the negotiations. The dealers dished out the cards, and Trump looked at his cards and said, "Oh well, I've got a couple of aces here. Would you like them?" And gave them away. And the Taliban must have thought, as it were, it's Christmas.
We're ending America's longest war.
Your own intelligence community has assessed that the Afghan government will likely collapse.
That is not true. You have the Afghan troops have 300,000 well equipped as any army in the world, and an air force against something like 75,000 Taliban.
Is a Taliban takeover of Afghanistan now inevitable?
No.
Mr. President, will you amplify that question, please? Will you amplify your answer, please, why you don't trust the Taliban?
It's a silly question. Do I trust the Taliban? No.
Trump made the decision to withdraw on May 1st. He then presented essentially President Biden a binary choice between abiding by that agreement or abrogating it.
Do you think his options were as simple as that, one or the other?
No, I don't agree. I think the right approach would have been to say, okay, we will not feel obliged to comply with that date. The withdrawal will be condition-based.
Thank you all so very much.
Have you spoken with any Taliban officials on the withdrawal?
They've been in Korea, South Korea, for 70 years when there is the possibility of war. So to just say 20 years is too long, call it a forever war, bit of a bumper sticker, and feel you've got to end it. I'm afraid that's part and parcel of the problem. It didn't have to be like this.
But once the Americans, without consultation within the alliance, decided to withdraw their troops, the other coalition partners had to do exactly the same, because without the Americans, we can't do anything.
We left Afghanistan when we did because the Americans said so. That's the blunt truth. I don't think there's anybody, certainly not in the British military, the British Defence Secretary, who for a moment thinks this was the right decision to make.
70% of Americans support the president's decision. Now, the implementation is still in question.
It's just horrendous. The Taliban are hitting people and the paratroopers have no choice but to hold the line. The road to safety is packed, thousands upon thousands. Once again, it's up to a small contingent of soldiers to deal with this mess.
Stay there! Stay there!
It's hard to put into words how desperate it is, and depressingly, most of these people won't make it through.
You need to wait, pal. I can't get through. I'm sorry. You need to go back.
It's hot, blisteringly hot. British soldiers spot a baby in danger, and they take control. With her family in tow, they make their way to the compound. These are combat soldiers, remember, but they also care what's happening here. Sometimes, just sometimes, you see joy breaking out. Like Wahid, a former British interpreter. He and his family are going to the UK. It's been agreed.
This is a very happy day in my life.
Yeah. Have you got family in Britain?
No.
So you're the first?
Yeah,
first
I'm
one.
going to go to Britain. That's my first trip to Britain.
And so you're waiting just to get processed?
Yes.
Was it scary outside?
Yes, it was very scary. It was very hard flying outside. Like a zombie.
Yeah.
Like a zombie.
So the zombie land.
Yeah.
What are you most excited about in Britain?
To educate my family and my children to Britain. And Britain, and become an engineer or doctor in Britain.
For the hopeful, it's a sort of purgatory. Day, night, it makes no difference. In their thousands, they just have to wait, sleeping rough, hoping for news. Hoping they can get into the system. At night, we walk past thousands of children, parents, grandparents, grabbing sleep or basically passing out from exhaustion. The soldiers do their best to help, but there's no food out here and little water. It is thankfully, though, cooler at night. When the sun comes up, the true horror of the conditions they're living in is obvious. The hysteria envelops the crowd from nowhere.
The problem now is not trying to control the crowds per se, it's the fact that at the front people are just getting crushed.
Shocked soldiers spray the crowd with a hose, anything to cool them down. Crushed, dehydrated and terrified. Men, women and lots of children.
Please call someone.
Is this a stabilized withdrawal from Afghanistan? It looks like death to me. In the mayhem, units rush through the crowds to shore up weak points in the evacuation center. They're working flat out trying to stem the tide of an unfolding disaster.
Thousands of Afghans who are coming who have no right to come here, but they're coming anyway, and they can't just leave them to get crushed in, and the heat is terrible and there's lots of children. So they're having to have a sort of secondary barrier where people who may have never get in properly are at least safe for the time being. It just seems to go from bad to worse here, and there's, I don't know, almost speechless as to what they're going to do about it.
American soldiers pulling children, whole families from the pens they're being kept behind for processing. These people fear their dreams of a flight out are ebbing away as each day passes. Soldiers are firing in the air. They fear they're losing control. Out here, pain and compassion meet every minute of every day. If it's to be turned around, they'll need more time. But time is running out.
I stand squarely behind my decision. We were clear-eyed about the risks. We planned for every contingency, but I always promised the American people that I will be straight with you. The truth is, this did unfold more quickly than we had anticipated. So what's happened?
The Taliban used the 17 months between the signing of the U.S.-Taliban agreement and August of 2021 very wisely, negotiating these surrenders or capitulations throughout the country, and they were universally successful. While the Afghan government just simply buried its head in the sand and didn't prepare its defensive positions, didn't prepare its units.
As we built the Afghan forces, we tended to focus on the inputs into that force, which could be quantified. And we didn't appreciate enough the fragility of those moral factors.
We withdrew our technical, training, mentoring and moral support, and they felt abandoned, and the fear of the Taliban took over. If we had stood with them, they would have continued to fight.
The main conclusion is you must never, ever go behind the back of your friends. And that's exactly what has happened here.
We're into the final days of the airlift now. British evacuees are loaded into trucks and vans. Their journey started days ago, but this is perhaps the beginning of the most important drive they'll ever take. This is the convoy that takes the latest evacuees to the Hamid Karzai International Airport to board a military flight to the UK. They go through the gates of the compound where their status has been checked and confirmed, and back into the territory of the Taliban and the wilderness of the thousands waiting for news. To the right, a sewage canal, a holding pen for people who might have the right paperwork. Thousands upon thousands trapped. Behind them, the Taliban. In front, soldiers deciding who stays and who goes. Nobody planned this. It's just how it is. The hours are counting down and they know it. And there are no good options left to them. Such is the desperation to be heard by the soldiers, the would-be evacuees are standing up to their knees in a sewage-filled canal. The stench is indescribable. Some have been here for days. It's hot, there's little water and hardly any food. These are mostly American soldiers, Marines. And when they can identify people with the right papers for travel, they pull them out of the canal. They emerge dripping wet but relieved.
The fact is that when the withdrawal happens, it's always going to be difficult because they can't keep working. The soldiers can't keep working up until the last minute. They have to start withdrawing in the days leading up to their departure. How they're going to deal with these people when that happens, we just don't know.
The security threats grow every day. Everyone knows it. The soldiers, the evacuees, even us. We talk about it constantly. We've been fighting to stay for days. To be here to document the final withdrawal of the troops after a 20-year campaign. But we've lost that battle, and now we have to leave. We load up and move out. We feel guilty for leaving. An easy exit for a group of journalists guaranteed safety by our soldiers and our governments.
A tough day. This evening in Kabul, as you all know, terrorists took the lives of American service members standing guard at the airport, wounded, several others seriously.
The attack was absolutely horrifying. I mean, really horrifying. It was an extraordinarily unsafe place to be. But Afghans saw this as their last chance to get out of the country.
Joe Biden may be able to say to the American people, well, we've removed all our troops, they're back home safely, but the indelible images the American people have is actually of a number of American service personnel being brought home in body bags because they got blown up by even worse insurgents than the Taliban.
The Taliban are not allied with these people who set off the bomb, but there's absolutely no doubt these people are able to operate with impunity inside a Taliban-controlled Afghanistan.
The Americans and other Western forces, including British forces, have left. There will be a Taliban-led government. If the Taliban are saying that they want diplomatic relations with the West, we should do so.
The reality of engagement with the Taliban is that you have to be very realistic about who they are, to understand that they have a horrifying record. But what alternative do we have? There is no leverage left over the Taliban. We've just handed the entire country to them.
President Biden said that he'll be going after these ISIS-K terrorists. How can you do that with the withdrawing troop presence?
Well, he could do it from over the horizon. And so both the intelligence, which will cue or trigger a strike against the Islamic State, as well as the strike capabilities themselves, can be, although imperfectly, can be based outside of Afghanistan. This is going to be hard, but not impossible.
President Biden keeps saying there's no terrorist threat coming from Afghanistan. I think his idea that he's ended the global war on terror is crazy. He's probably given another 10 years to these types of terrorist threats, totally unnecessarily. He's given a huge morale victory to jihadists around the world.
If you get the situation where the international community turns its back on Afghanistan, Afghanistan begins to devolve into warring fiefdoms and a new civil war, then that's the scenario where Al-Qaeda is going to come back, where Islamic State is going to get more of a presence. That's the scenario where you're going to get your most acute international terrorist threat.
Well, I want to show you something, Mr. President. Afghanistan is going to change so much in this action of yours that you will be amazed what happened. The backlash, the result, what is going to happen in the world because of this decision will be so phenomenal that the world is going to say, wow, what the heck did we do?
For America just to remove itself voluntarily in such an humiliating way is to provide a strategic victory for the West's adversaries. The Chinese, the Russians, the Iranians are absolutely delighted about this, and they're telling their peoples, there, we told you so. This is what American power does.
One lesson should be learned from this, namely, when the United States withdraw, then they will leave behind a vacuum, and that void will be filled by the bad guys. And that's exactly what we have seen demonstrated in Afghanistan.
The C-17 we board is absolutely huge.
So we're finally on the place. I mean, it's absolutely full. I can't believe my eyes. It's huge, but there's over 400 people in here.
The evacuees here are fortunate to get out of Afghanistan for certain, but their lives have been altered immeasurably in just over a week. A bag each is all they have left of their lives.
quite an experience, really. And really sad. Overwhelmingly sad, actually. It's all the people that are still there, waiting. These are one of the last few flights going now. There ain't many left.
And just before takeoff, the lights turn green. And that is it. In the green light, we watch families sit and talk, their children restless at times or asleep, a chatter mixed with anxiety. I can't get the faces of those left behind out of my mind, standing in the sewage canal, pleading for help. I never will.